Hello, Telesur English presents a new episode of China Now, a Wave Media's production that showcases the culture, technology and politics of the Asian giant. In this first segment, China Currents dives into the top stories of the week as the US revoked Harvard's Student and Exchange Visitor Program certification, barring international student enrollment, and Chinese universities extend invitations. Let's see.
China Currents is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to China Currents, your weekly news report on the latest developments in China. I'm Chris, and in this episode, US revokes Harvard's Students and Exchange Visitor Program certification, barring international student enrollment, and Chinese universities extend invitations. Chinese company Xiaomi debuted self-developed 3nm smartphone chip. China-aided N'Djamena Stadium inaugurated in Chad. China's Fujian aircraft carrier conducts 8th sea trial. New China-Europe freight train route link Wuhan, China and Poti, Georgia. China held the world's first humanoid robot combat tournament. First, on May 22nd, the US government revoked Harvard University's Student Exchange Visitor Program, that's SEVP certification, effectively banning the institution from admitting international students. Current international students were warned to transfer institutions or risk losing legal status. US authorities baselessly accused Harvard of improper collaboration with China and issued an ultimatum. To restore its SEVP status, Harvard must submit records of foreign students' alleged illegal activities over the past 5 years within 72 hours. Former US Treasury Secretary and Harvard President Emeritus Lawrence Summers condemned the move, stating it signals America's abandonment of its role as a global beacon of talent. Chinese students, comprising 20% of Harvard's international cohort, are expected to bear the brunt of the policy. At the May 23rd press conference, China's Foreign Ministry reaffirmed its opposition to politicizing educational exchanges and vowed to protect Chinese students' lawful rights. Multiple Hong Kong universities, including Hong Kong Polytechnic University, announced plans to admit affected students, offering scholarships and dedicated support teams to streamline transfers. Next, Chinese company Xiaomi unveiled 3nm chip. On May 22nd, Xiaomi launched its first self-designed 3nm flagship processor, the X-Ring 01, powering its latest smartphones, Xiaomi 15S Pro, and tablets, Xiaomi Pad 7 Ultra. This milestone positions Xiaomi as the fourth global firm after Apple, Qualcomm, and MediaTek to mass-produce 3nm mobile chips. CEO Lei Jun reveals the decade-long R&D effort, with over 13 billion yuan invested since 2021 and a 2,500-member engineering team. The X-Ring 01 reportedly rivals Apple's A18 Pro in transistor density and process technology, while outperforming it in thermal management during intensive tasks like gaming. Professor Sun Chengliang from the Institute of Technological Sciences, Wuhan University, noted that a smartphone system on a chip integrates critical components like CPUs and GPUs, demanding extreme precision in performance and power efficiency. Xiaomi's breakthrough could accelerate the upgrade of China's semiconductor supply chain, and People's Daily praised the innovation as a testament to Chinese private enterprises' resilience in a competitive global landscape. Moving on, China-aided N'Djamena Stadium inaugurated in Chad. Chad's President Mahatma Debi inaugurated the China-aided N'Djamena Stadium on May 23rd, marking its official launch with a ceremonial kickoff on a football pitch. President Debi commended the initiative as a symbol of strong Sino-Chadian collaboration founded on mutual respect and common vision. Chinese ambassador to Chad, Wang Xining, emphasized the project as a landmark of bilateral friendship and collaboration on the Belt and Road Initiative. Constructed by Shanxi Construction Engineering Group, the 33,000 square meter complex features a 30,000 seat capacity, modern facilities, and multi-purpose venues for football, basketball, and handball. As Chad's first stadium that meets Africa Cup standards and other major sports events, It stands as the largest Chinese-aided project in the country to date. Next up, on May 24th, China Central Television News reported that China's first electromagnetic catapult-equipped aircraft carrier, the Fujian, is holding intensive sea trials. With a displacement exceeding 80,000 tons, the Fujian is the world's largest conventionally powered warship. Since its maiden trial on May 1, 2024, the vessel has completed 8 tests in just over a year, the latest in March. The rapid pace underscores both the smooth progress of trials and the carrier's robust design and construction. CCTV highlighted the ship's electromagnetic catapult system, which enables launches of heavier aircraft at higher frequencies. With a catapult carrier, fighter jets can take off with full fuel and weapon loads, directly enhancing their combat effectiveness. The system's adjustable launch power also supports diverse aircraft, from transport planes to drones to early warning aircrafts, enhancing operational flexibility. Chinese military affairs experts Chao Wei-dong stated that Fujian will significantly bolster the Chinese Navy's capabilities in coastal defense and long-range maritime operations. Expected to enter service by late 2025, the carrier will usher China into a 3-carrier era. Next, on May 24th, the China-Europe Railway Express Wuhan-Horgas-Port-Tbilisi departed from Wuhan CR Intermodal Rail Center, marking the first time the Wuhan-Europe route has extended to Georgia via a new Trans-Caspian International Corridor. Carrying light machinery, agricultural vehicles, and construction materials worth approximately 14.82 million yuan, the train will exit China via the Horgas port, traverse Kazakhstan, and transfer by ferry across the Caspian Sea at Aktau port to Azerbaijan's Baku. It will then proceed by rail to Georgia's Poti and Tbilisi, completing the 18-day rail-sea-rail intermodal journey. The new route represents a strategic expansion of the China-Europe Railway's southern corridor, enhancing supply chain resilience and reinforcing Georgia's role as a pivotal Silk Road hub at the Eurasian crossroads. By linking Central Asia, the Caucasus, and Europe, the service provides Chinese enterprises with a stable logistics channel to boost trade with Georgia, Turkey, and neighboring regions. To date, the Wuhan-Europe Railway Express operates 58 stable cross-border routes connecting 120 cities across 40 countries in Europe, Central Asia, ASEAN, and East Asia, solidifying its position as a critical international logistics network. Moving on May 25th, Hangzhou hosted the inaugural Global Humanoid Robot Combat Tournament, featuring fierce battles between 4 teams using Unitree G1 robots. Operator Lu Xin's AI strategist claimed victory through precise tactical decisions and stable performance, securing the championship on points. As the robot participants, the company's flagship humanoid robot, Unitree G1, stands 1.32 meters tall and weighs 35 kilograms. It's equipped with advanced computing power and smooth motion control. According to Chen Xiyun, a marketing team member of Unitree Robotics, Unitree G1 was designed to operate in environments that are challenging for humans, offering enhanced flexibility and agility in a compact form. The event, a bold experiment in humanoid robotics, tested extreme technical limits. Competing robots executed rapid, high-intensity movements, punches, kicks, and dodges, generating substantial impact forces and torque that challenged balance and structural integrity. Li Gaofeng, a researcher at Zhejiang University's College of Control Science and Engineering, noted that while the robot's performance exceeded developers' expectations, achieving practical productivity remains distant. He predicted the next breakthrough will focus on dexterous manipulation in robotic hands, tactile feedback, and operational precision. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you have any thoughts or comments, please leave them below. And see you next time.
We have a short break now, but don't go away because we'll be right back. Welcome back to China Now. Today, Thinkers Forum welcomes George Gio, former Minister of Foreign Affairs in the Singapore government, and Albert Wang, current affairs commentator, to go deep into China's trade relations and challenges for upcoming years. Enjoy.
Very quickly, because I can't resist, I just want some gossip. You are one of the most well-respected diplomats in all of Asia. We've read so many stories about you, heard your speeches, and also heard about a lot of story about your experience of the past few decades. What is some of your most memorable times personally for you, and with regards to China and in relationship with Chinese state leaders?
I was a young minister, and Lee Kuan Yew was trying to teach me. So there was one year, I think it was in 1990 or 1991, George Bush Sr. was in Singapore. And a few days later, Yang Shangkun, China's president, would be in Singapore. So Lee Kuan Yew asked me they had two private meetings. So he asked me to be the note taker for both meetings. So with George Bush, the note taker was Brent Scowcroft, National Security Advisor. And George Bush was US ambassador to China. He was also CIA chief. And he meant China well. And he told Lee Kuan Yew to pass a message to Yang Shangkun to help him help China. Because Congress was making a big deal over MFN, Most Favored Nation status. So I took the notes for that meeting. Then a few days later, I saw the way Lee Kuan Yew met Yang Shangkun. And Yang Shangkun was already elderly, he sat back. But he was such a large man, large in spirit, you know. You could say anything to him, he can accept it. Because he has seen war before. Yeah. He has seen deaths. And Lee Kuan Yew told him, China should join GATT before the WTO. So you avoid this MFN yearly struggle. And Lee Kuan Yew has some critical things to say about China. He meant it in a good way. Yang Shangkun took it in a very relaxed, big-hearted way. I still have the notebook where I kept notes of both meetings. I'm a very bad note taker. I don't write detailed sentences. I just make a few points. Then I write it up. That to me was a great privilege to watch two meetings. And Lee Kuan Yew was respected by both of them. And he did not behave as if he was the prime minister of a small country. They respected him because he did not talk like the leader of a small country. He was respected because his mind and his heart embraced them. So that was very impressive. I was at that time, 1991, 54, 37 years old. And it was a privilege to have been asked by Lee Kuan Yew to be his note taker for both meetings. And that led subsequently to APEC and to many other things, because China was recovering from the sanctions resulting from Liu Si. And Bush wanted to help China because at that time there were other challenges.
And from then on, that really kickstarted China fully joining the globalized trading system.
It took almost 10 years. And when I was trade minister, I was very involved in that, not directly, but indirectly. China acceded to the WTO under more exacting terms than any other country which joined the WTO. I know the people who were involved: Bob Zoellick, Pascal Lamy, and they were negotiating for the US, for America. Japan had its interests. Other countries had their interests. And they were all afraid that China will swamp them with cheap manufacturing. So they gave China developing country status, which China deserved. But there are all kinds of constraints. They didn't recognize China as a market economy. After China joined the WTO in Doha, I was there. Xie Guangsheng, Long Yong-tu, they were all there. Everybody clapped. The following day, Taiwan also joined. It was part of an agreement. A few years later, Singapore, New Zealand, Chile, and Brunei established the TPP. I met Shi Guangsheng. I said, "Why don't you join the TPP?" He said, "China already gave in so much." So when people today say that they should not have allowed China to
China took
join
advantage and yeah.
they didn't realize that they pushed China to the limit for its accession to the WTO. No one knew, not even China, that China would continue to grow steadily over the next 20 years. So that by the beginning of COVID, at the end of 2019, China's economy had grown 7 times in PPP terms, 9 times in renminbi terms, and 11 times in US dollar terms. So China became very big. And during the global financial crisis in 2008, the G7 could not create sufficient global demand. So the following year, Gordon Brown hosted a second meeting in London. And then all 20 countries agreed to coordinate fiscal and monetary policy. And China introduced a 4 trillion yuan budget.
Yeah.
And after that, I read the report. In 3 years, China poured more concrete than the US in its entire history. China was building everywhere to spend.
Yeah.
It helped.
Yeah.
So the global recession was shorter than it would have been otherwise. But it created enormous distortions in China. And it took China many years to smoothen out those distortions.
Even until today.
Even until today.
Yes.
Yeah. So part of the property boom had its origins
There.
in those days. But China also developed infrastructure. I went to Xizang in 2009. And before I went up, I called on the vice president, who was Xi Jinping. He said, "It's good that you're visiting Xizang." It was after the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
And I was the first foreign minister to visit Xizang. And then they brought me to a Nongming house. Then on top was a satellite dish. It says, "Donated by the State Council and the Communist Party."
Okay.
I said, this is part of the 4 trillion renminbi budget.
The satellite dish is for what, TV? What was
Well, to receive satellite communication, television, radio, whatever,
it? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
But China was spending.
Yeah.
Yeah, and China could spend at the time. But China's economy at that time, I think it's 1/3 China's economy today. So today, if there's another global financial crisis,
Yes.
without China, the world will go into a deep recession. And US Treasury knows this. So even under Biden, Yellen was very careful to keep links with China, with Wang Qishan and so on. And Wang Qishan, because they knew that if there's a crisis, the US and China have to work together. And the US knows that the position of the US dollar as reserve currency requires China's cooperation.
My question is, in designing a global structure for the world, these institutions like the world economy, the world financial system, the international tax system, and so on, what should be our principles guiding that structuring of the world? And here I'm saying, if you are really a Rawlsian, which I'm really not, but if you are a Rawlsian, you should again emphasize the position of the worst off. We want whatever influence the global institutional order has on the world to be influence that favors the bottom position, that raises the bottom position as much as possible. And so that would be what I think a consequential Rawlsianism would imply at the global level.
So why did you, normatively or philosophically, how did you come up with that statement? How's your process of argument that that kind of war will be better than maybe Trump wants a very unequal world? What's the argument behind all this?
Yeah, the argument is, I mean, again, my work is really is a two-track work. A lot of the work that I've done is simply within the Rawlsian enterprise. So I'm saying, if you accept Rawlsian kind of approach Rawlsian normative thinking, then you have to work it out in the correct way. You have to follow the argument to where it leads. So on that inside track, I would simply say I accept Rawls's argument, the original position, the two principles of justice, the focus on the least advantaged, and so on. And I'm applying that argument internationally. Now, of course, somebody can say, but internationally, there are many different cultures, they have different considered judgments, different intuitions. All that is true. But if we are, as US people, if we are convinced by the Rawlsian type of normative content, then we should be willing to take that normative content also to the global level, right? Or at the very least, if you want to have a different theory domestically and globally, then the burden of proof is on you to explain why not. That was my challenge, right? So if you are a Rawlsian domestically, you have to explain to me why you don't want to be a Rawlsian, have the same demands on international or supranational structures as you impose on domestic structures. Now, from the outside, I would not be as confident that the full menu of Rawlsian ideas should be globalized. And the reason, of course, is cultural diversity, right? So some of the considered judgments that Rawls relies on for his theory are ones that are not deeply entrenched in other cultures. So what I would say in my own voice at the global level is we should have a more minimalist theory of global justice, something like a theory that requires that global institutions must be designed so that all human needs are met. Some people would say human rights, some people would say human needs, some people would say capabilities. It's all the same thing, more or less. There are certain basic things that every human being should have, and any global order that avoidably fails to provide that, to ensure that for people, is morally defective. That was my main claim in the book, World Poverty and Human Rights.
Yeah, thank you. So can I understand in this way is like there should be no hypocrisy. There should be no exceptionalism. Because what Trump is pushing, and I think for a lot of American presidents were pushing, like maybe not so explicitly, is like, I want it one way in America because we are a guided city by the God. We are a provided city by the God. But on the international, we will do whatever it takes to make sure we have that kind of exceptionalism on the states.
Yeah.
So if Trump is saying like, I will be a good student of Rawls on the states, only because it can only happen after we achieved international hegemony, after we exploit all the other countries to ensure we can be just domestically. How would you argue against that?
Yeah, so this is very good what you're saying, first of all, and very, very much to the point. So philosophically, there is a double standard. That's how I would call it.
Yes.
And it is that double standard that I was attacking. But I talked many, many, many hours with Rawls after I finished my PhD. And this exceptionalism that you bring out was deeply ingrained in him. He was not just a philosopher, he also studied history a lot. He was a great admirer of Abraham Lincoln, for example. And he had a very fundamental emotional belief that America, for all its faults, for all the terrible things it has done, America will always, in the end, come out on the right side. And that is not true of Germany, that is not true of Russia, that is not true of France. There is no other place that you can rely on to find the way forward. So he was very much against the Vietnam War, and he understood how horrible that war was, how many millions of people it destroyed and killed. He was not a person who didn't accept that. He acknowledged that, he understood that. But he said, look, we overcame it. The United States rid itself of Nixon, of that war, and we, in the end, after a long struggle, we managed to move forward. And what he would say now about Trump is, of course, is another question, right? But he would have thought maybe there can be something like fascism in America, maybe that can arise, but it will be defeated. He was a real optimist about America, and maybe understandably so, given how he grew up and given the experience, that historical experience of America in that period. And if you think now from the present point of view, if we have hope for the future, where do we place that hope? What is the progressive force in the world that can make sure that we survive the next century and can take humanity forward in a peaceful, harmonious way? I would say China is much more likely to succeed in that task, and I think that we would be in real deep shit if we didn't have China at this point. But that's not a view that Rawls would share, I think. Rawls would, if he were still alive, would probably think that just wait. Trump is horrible, but just wait and America will get it right again.
Yeah, I think that kind of thinking is pretty much rooted in the generation of American who has been through World War II. The American was portrayed as the big savior of the mankind, more or less, I would say. But like when they do that, they exclude Soviet Union on that narrative. So
and they also exclude a lot of what they did in the Second World War. The history is very one-sided,
So you were saying like if we need a rewriting of the global order to achieve a more just world, we will need, like you say, institutional changes instead of like I was saying, I was mistaken. Like you cannot just helping out others. There is one saying in China is like if you give one a fish, he will survive for 1 day. But if you told him fishing, he will survive for the rest of his life.
But this is not the right analogy either, because it's not. We are not giving a fish. We are not teaching how to fish. We are changing the economic structure. So, for example, we are creating schools so that every child in China can go to school. Right? We make sure that the children who go to school get meals in school. Every child on every school day gets a meal. That is structural change. And that is what moves the country forward, right? Because if you teach a person how to fish, you are still just dealing with one individual person. You are the savior, the rich person giving the poor person some skill or something like that. This is a higher level thing where you fundamentally change the whole structure. So instead of having some people who are the landowners and other people who are maybe taught by the landowner how to fish, you change the whole structure so that everybody can be a landowner, or that maybe land isn't privately owned, but so it's that this is really Marxism in a way, or a Marxist approach to what really we need to achieve in society. We need to restructure it.
So you have envisioned these kind of institutional changes in so many ways. Like you have proposed this idea of global resource dividend and the health and ecology impact fund. Could you explain to our Chinese audiences what exactly do you envision in those programs?
Yeah, these ideas, they bring out that often when we look at the world, we take its fundamental features for granted.
Yes.
And what I try to do is step 5 steps back and say, it could be very differently organized. So let me start with the global resources dividend, right? Resources are the fundament of the entire economy, right? Without resources, you cannot do anything.
Yes.
So you need minerals, you need energy and all this stuff. Now, these resources are currently said to belong to the countries. Where they are. And that, you might say, should be challenged, right? Why should a country, simply because it happens to be in a certain location, why should it own all the oil or all the copper that is in that location? So, but the fundamental problem is that in our world, these resources are exploited by elites. So the Saudis sit on the oil, and it gets refined, it gets sold to Exxon or to Shell, and elites are using these resources, and the benefits go to the shareholders of Exxon, to the Saudi elite, but 99% of the world's population see nothing from these minerals. And what I was proposing with the global resources dividend is to say, look, at the very least, let 3% or 4% of the value of all the natural resources in the world be used to give to the poorest people. Let them be the co-owners of these resources. Let them be entitled to a share of any resources that are extracted. And if you think about it, that would obviously be a much, much, much more just arrangement.
Yes.
But we always take for granted that the resources, of course, they belong to the country where they are found. And I'm challenging that. So I designed that in great detail, a $300 billion a year global resources dividend, which would essentially erase all poverty in the world. It would be enough at that time with those dollars to completely eradicate poverty. And it would essentially just raise the price of goods that have resources in them a little bit. You know, the gasoline at the gas station would be a little more expensive and so on. And poor people would participate in resource exploitation.
But those prices already rigged. So even if we don't have that kind of dividend, the price is also rigged by the ultra rich.
Of course.
So
of course.
And what about the health and the ecology?
The Health Impact Fund. Yeah, that's another one of the arrangements that we have in the world. This one is new. It was put in place in 1995 when the WTO was founded, the World Trade Organization. And part of that treaty that founded the WTO was the TRIPS agreement, which stands for Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. It's an agreement that commits every country in the world to issue 20-year product patents on innovations. So you're required to give these patents and you're required to enforce them. And that means if a new medicine is developed, and these medicines are expensive to develop, so they are developed in countries like Switzerland, the US, Japan, never in poor countries, then the innovator of that medicine can patent it around the world and can sell it at a very high price because, of course, people want to live, they want to have to buy the medicine. And often the price that you pay for the medicine is 1,000 times or 3,000 times higher than the cost of production. So before TRIPS, Indian pharmaceutical companies, so-called generic companies, they would mass produce medicine at a very, very low price and sell it. So every new medicine was available to Indians and available all around the developing world at very low prices. TRIPS cut that off, and now the medicine reaches only 5 or 6% of the global population. For example, sofosbuvir, which is a recent medicine against hepatitis C, it is now on the market maybe for 10 years. It is reaching 5 or 7% of the people who need it because of the high price. So again, I'm saying this is a terrible system. Is there a better way? And I'm saying, yes, there's a better way. Of course, you have to reward the people who invest in developing a new medicine, but you don't have to reward them by giving them a monopoly.
Yes.
You reward them by giving them a reward that is proportioned to the health impact of their innovation. The more people take my medicine, the more they benefit from taking my medicine, the more money goes to the inventor of the medicine. That's the much better system, the Health Impact Fund system. So again, my objective is to say we could arrange things very differently in a way that is still feasible, works, incentivizes pharmaceutical research, but at the same time makes the fruits of that research available worldwide to everybody, rich and poor.
And this was another episode of China Now, a show that opens a window to the present and future of the Asian giant. Hope you enjoyed and see you next time.